Hello everybody, this is Mr. Strager, and I want to talk a little bit about the quiz that we're about to take today. So, as a reminder, this quiz is going to be on 8.1 to 8.3. However, since I am not there have to be a couple of changes, some good, some bad. First things first, since I cannot be physically there to proctor, I cannot, in my good conscience, give an online test. There's no way I can do that. Especially with the amount of cheating that happened during the last test, I do not feel comfortable giving the vast majority of students an online test. That comes with another unfortunate consequence, which is that means there are going to be no checks on this quiz, where there normally are. However, I think the accommodations far outweigh the costs. First things first, I have shortened the quiz down to 5 questions. I have made this a paper quiz, which does make it a little bit trickier. However, in addition to shortening the quiz, I am also allowing you to work on it with a partner. So, this is going to be a partner quiz as well. With all that said, I do want us to take a look at some of these questions before we get started. So, I'm going to put up a couple of questions that will help you review for this quiz. Now, I'm going to instruct the sub to pause the video at certain points so you can try out the problem on your own. When about maybe 3/4 of you, 2/3 of you are done, I will ask the sub to unpause the video so you can see the process. So, for starters, I'm on page 248, and I'm taking a look at problem number 2 to review. Problem number 2 asks us to identify the characteristics of the quadratic function and its graph. Now, one hint before I pause the video is this. Anytime it says to identify the characteristics, we go for our standard. We're looking for the vertex, the axis of symmetry, the domain, the range. Additionally, we're looking for when it is increasing, decreasing, and if there are any special characteristics. Things like, did it stretch, did it shrink, did it flip, did it move, things like that. With that said, I know this problem is going to take probably a little bit longer. Don't worry, the paper version won't have you do all 7 of these things. Pause the video, try it out for yourself. Hopefully you've had a chance to pause the video at this point. Let's talk about this. The vertex of a quadratic function is always going to be either the highest or the lowest point. It's always the part where the graph changes direction. So there's our vertex up there. And this vertex happens to be at x of 3, y of 4. So it's 3, 4, since we always do x, y. The axis of symmetry is the line through which our parabola can flip over. For instance, if I covered up this half of the graph, I could tell you what the other half looks like because we just flip it over. It's identical. That's what it means to be an axis of symmetry. Well, since the axis of symmetry always goes through the vertex, it's always going to share that first number. The axis of symmetry is x equals 3 in this case. Let's talk about domain and range. The domain is the list of all the possible x values this graph can go through. But you see, these arrows go on infinitely at a sort of an angle. It's going to keep on going and getting wider and wider and wider and wider and wider as it goes, which means the domain is infinite. We could say all real numbers, or if you want to be fancy and make Mr. Strager smile when he's grading the quizzes, you could use the all real number symbol, which is just a bolded R, like this, all real numbers. The domain of every parabola you're going to see is going to be all real numbers. X is all real numbers. The range, on the other hand, is different. The range asks how high up or low down can our graph go. Well, it goes down and down and down and down, so it's going to go down forever. But does it go up forever? No, it reaches a maximum. That's another clue about what might be on the test. It reaches a maximum. Where is that maximum? Well, it's when y is at 4. So, the range is that our y value could be anything as long as it doesn't go over 4. How can we write that as an inequality? If this y value should be anything as long as it's not bigger than 4, we say that y could be less than or equal to 4. That's the range. For increasing and decreasing, we're just looking from left to right when the graph is going up and when it's going down. If we go left to right, this is like a roller coaster. It goes up, 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 and then down, down, down. So it's increasing on the left side, and it's decreasing on the right. Well, how do we explain that in mathematical terms? We use intervals, just like we did for the range. Notice how the graph is increasing up, 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 and up until it reaches our vertex, until it reaches x equals 3. We say then that it's increasing when x is less than 3. A key note, your increasing and decreasing will always be in terms of x. So when x is less than 3, because 3 is where it hits the top, it's increasing. After it hits 3, it goes back down, so we would say when x is greater than 3, it's decreasing. Finally, are there any special features about this? And we notice there are. There's just one for this one in particular, but the special feature with this is it's flipped. We call that a reflection in the x-axis. And technically you could also say it's a translation 3 units to the right and translation 4 units up. On the quiz, I've designed it so that you won't need to worry about that. All right, that's the first question I wanted to go over. Next question. I actually want you to take out a separate sheet of paper for this one, because this is going to require some thinking. On a separate sheet of paper, I want you to sketch some graphs. Now, I said sketch for a very important reason. On the actual test, you will not need to do any drawing. However, I do want you to get in the habit of telling what an equation will be in graph form just from looking at it. Hint, hint. So, here's what I want you to do. I want you to sketch, meaning roughly draw, graphs of these 4 here. There's going to be a couple of things I'm looking out for the correct answer. Also, notice these graphs are very similar, so it's very important that you really accentuate their differences. Sound good? Pause the video here, sketch out these 4 graphs. All right. Hopefully you've had a chance to try this one out. Let's see. First things first, 5x squared plus 1. This plus 1, our c value, tells us how much up or down we go. In fact, it's our y-intercept. So we can just plop a dot right there. What does our a value tell us, this 5? Well, the a value controls the stretch and shrink. What happens when your a value is bigger than 1? We call that a vertical stretch. Like pulling taffy, we're making it taller and taller and taller. So this graph is going to be real skinny. I'm talking like this. This should be approximately what your sketch looks like. And for the one right next to it, we see that that stretch is still in effect. It's still a stretch because the a value is bigger than 1. So it's going to be skinny, just like this one. But notice the c value. It's -1. So this graph is going to have a similar stretch, but it's going to be moved down 1. Very similar. One is moved up 1, one is moved down 1. Down below, let's take a look at these. Again, we see this c value of +1. So we know it's going to be up here. But our a value is a fraction. What do we know about when our a value is a fraction? We call this a vertical shrink, and it's going to get wider and wider and wider. So this parabola is going to look more like a bowl than a cup. That was a terrible graph, but you know what? This is why it's a sketch. This is more like what this graph is going to look like. And what's different about this one? It's still going to be a shrink because it has this 1/5. So it's still going to be its wide bowl, but this -1 tells us it's also one down instead of one up. Another terrible graph by Mr. Strager, but that's why we say to sketch. Your 4 graphs should resemble this, and here's what I'm mainly looking for. Your top 2 graphs should be narrow. Your bottom 2 graphs should be wide. Your left 2 graphs should be moved up 1, and your right 2 graphs should be moved down 1. That's the next question I wanted to tackle with you all. Let's try another one. This one is going to be back in the student journal, so don't worry, we're not going too far. But you will have to do some page flipping because we're going to flip over to 8.2. In 8.2, on page 253, there is a practice, number 3. And it asks you to graph the function and compare the graph to x squared. I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to actually graph this because it's going to take too much time. What I do want you to do is this. I want you, just from the equation, to tell me exactly how this graph transforms. Tell me, what does this graph's special characteristics look like? And how do you know? In the blank space below, write me what the special characteristics look like and how you know. Pause the video and try this one out. Hopefully you've had a chance to try this one out as well. Let's talk about the special characteristics. The special characteristics of this graph are this a value and this c value. And the a value actually has 2 special characteristics, but we'll get to that later. We just talked about what the c value changes. What does the c value change? The c is your y-intercept, so it controls your up and down. So you could say n of x is translated vertically. Remember, translated just means slide 2 units down. We should know what this 3 part of our a value means. What does the 3 mean? We just talked about a problem like it. This a value bigger than 1 tells us that it's going to be a stretch. N of x is vertically stretched by a factor of, how much is it stretching by? Well, it's just the number itself. So it's stretching by a factor of 3. But there's also this negative in front. And what do we know about a negative in this case? The negative sign flips your graph upside down. So we say n of x is reflected over the x axis. These would be the 3 things I'm looking for on a test, or in this case, our quiz. You should be able to tell just from the numbers how a graph translates, or transforms, I should say. Technically also translates because it translated. The last thing I want us to do for today is I want us to flip all, pardon me, I want us to flip all the way to page 258 to a problem that we've already done, but I want us to try it again, completely fresh. Number 4 asks you to find the axis of symmetry and the vertex of the graph of the function. Now, before the substitute teacher pauses this, I do want to mention a couple of things. The substitute teacher has been instructed to write down the following formula up on the board. They're not able to tell you what this formula means. They're not able to tell you what it's used for, but I certainly can. Whenever you are trying to find the mystery vertex and you have a b value, in other words, you have a middle number, our b value, you use this formula to find the x-coordinate of your vertex. Once you find the x-coordinate, you can find the y-coordinate by plugging it back in. Once again, pause the video here, try it out for yourself. Let's see how we do. All right, at this point in time, let's talk. So, as mentioned, our b value is 6, and if the formula is negative b over 2a, that should be negative 6 divided by 2 times our a value. What is our a value? Our a value is what's in front of the x squared, negative 3. So we're going to put negative 3 in parentheses. The negative carries with the 3. Now what you do is simplify this. Well, negative 6 is just negative 6, and 2 times negative 3, isn't that also negative 6? Well, what's negative 6 divided by itself? It's 1. What does this mean? It means that our vertex has an x-coordinate of 1. 1 comma mystery. That's what it means. Now, additionally, we also know our axis of symmetry. Remember how before I mentioned if you know your vertex, the axis of symmetry is just the first number in your vertex? It's the same here. Axis of symmetry is x equals 1. Now, to find the y value of our vertex, we're going to take x equals 1 and plug it back into our equation. So everywhere we see an x, we're going to replace it with a 1. Let's do this. F of 1 equals negative 3 times 1 squared plus 6 times 1 plus, well, 1. And again, all I did was I took this formula and I changed all the x's into 1s in parentheses. And now we solve step by step. Well, by going through PEMDAS, we know that we have to do our exponents first. 1 squared is just 1 though. So it's 3 times 1 plus 6 times 1 plus 1. Well, we also know that negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. We know that 6 times 1 is 6, and we have our 1 at the end. When we add them all together, what do we get? We get 4. So our y-coordinate of our vertex is 4. With that, you should have enough in order to take your quiz. Before you find your partner, here are the rules. Most importantly, do not, I beg of you, do not just pick your best friend. The reason I say this is, sometimes your best friend is a perfect match for you mathematically, and both of you can complete each other's unknown areas. Sometimes y'all are nightmares together, because when one of you wasn't paying attention, the other one of you wasn't paying attention in class. So, please pick a partner that you know is going to help you be successful on this quiz. Rule number 2, your desks must be moved together in order for you to work together. If you do not want a partner, you may work alone. If you cannot find a partner, raise your hand, keep it raised, and the sub will try to assign you a partner, if there are any available. Rule number 3. Please show all work. Because this is a paper test, I don't care about the answer. Legitimately, you could get every answer wrong, and you could still get 100% on the test, or on the quiz. The reason is, I'm only grading your work, your shown work. So, for problems like this, I need to see all your steps, plugging in the formula, then plugging the number back into the equation. Otherwise, I won't know how on earth you did it. For questions where it asks you to analyze, write out your characteristics, draw arrows, point out the vertex, do what you can to show you know your stuff. Excuse me. For questions like these, where I ask you to point out the special characteristics and there's vocabulary to fill in, write it out. Show me what the A value is. Show me what the C value is. And write down what they represent. Write down that the C is the y-intercept and moves it up and down. Write that an A value greater than 1 is a vertical stretch. Show me you know what you're talking about. Finally, for a question like this, if you're asked to match graphs to an equation, show your reasoning, just like how I did here. Show me that an A value bigger than 1 is a stretch, and a C value bigger than 1 is moving it up, or so on and so forth. Lastly, and most importantly, all electronics must be put away. The sub is instructed where if they see an electronic, doesn't matter if it's in your lap, on your desk, or falling out of your backpack. If they see an electronic, they are instructed to give you a 0 for this quiz. Make sure you write your name and your partner's name on your quizzes, and make sure you and your partner both do your own work. With that said, everybody, best of luck.